In this video, I'll be talking about everything that needed to be fixed or improved on the Glock Gen 5. And with the Glock Gen 6 just being released, I'm going to do an in-depth review of what information they gave us. I'll pull up some pictures, my monstrosity of the Glock Gen 5, and all the improvements I've made to get it up to par and competing at the level that it should be with other handguns, performing optimally. First and foremost, they need to fix the grip angle. Right now, it is a 22-degree grip angle, which is very slanted. Instead of holding it where my wrist is straight, you have to push the wrist down a little bit. When you present the gun, sometimes your dot isn't right there because of that grip angle and having to cant the wrist downwards. So it takes a little bit more training or just doesn't feel as natural. Also seems to put a little bit more stress on the wrist, and it can make clamping around the gun a little bit more difficult when you're clamping and your wrists are slanted downwards rather than if I'm clamping and my wrists are straight. It's much easier with an 18-degree or a straight grip angle. The trigger on the Gen 5 definitely needs improvement. It's about a 5.5-pound trigger pull. There's a really hard wall. The reset feels fine, but the overall movement and motion of the trigger is choppy, not smooth, and I would appreciate as well if they could lessen up some of the weight of the trigger pull. I don't think a 5.5-pound trigger pull is needed, especially when you already have a trigger safety on there. Taken down from 3 to 4.5 pounds, that would compete a lot better with the other triggers that are out there on the market. With it having a trigger safety, I would at least think you could decrease the trigger weight a pound, make it a more smoother, lighter trigger pull, so the gun's not going to move around in your hand as much when you're slapping that trigger. The huge one's the sights. They're plastic, so you can't even call them iron sights. They don't hold zero. The front will loosen on its own or pop off. The rear will move on its own. So your so-called zero that you would get from these iron sights can't even retain itself. The crazy thing too is that Glock makes steel OEM iron sights and they don't include them on their firearms. I used the steel ones and I didn't like them as much as these Amerigalo here. The front sight didn't tighten down very well, which made it more difficult to install. The plastic sights need to be thrown in the trash. With optics being so common and prioritized nowadays, at least replaced with metal iron sights, if not suppressor height iron sights. Make them a loco witness, especially if you're getting direct mounting. Next, we have the slide release and slide stop. The stock one is complete garbage. It's hard to push it up to lock the slide back, and it's hard to activate. It's so smooth and flush with the side of the gun that it does not make it easy to use. Now known as Primatiat, way better, completely superior to the Glock one. It's up out of the way of your grip, so it's not gonna stop the slide from locking back. The triangle here on the front is much easier to hit, and because it's on a smaller surface like the slide, since it's up higher, makes it a lot easier to activate, or just make it bulge out to the side a little bit more. The MOS optic mounting system could definitely use a revamp. I don't think it's terrible for what it is because there's a lot of different adapter plates that are out there that you can attach to this to mount your optic, but compared to something like Shadow Systems and the Springfield Echelon, where you can directly mount a bunch of different optics on there using spacers or the little rods that you put down in, definitely a lot better of a system. Most of your iron sights, or if you get a slightly taller set, most of them are going to work with any of your optics that you mount, and they're going to co-witness in the lower 1/3 or below that. So that's another plus to a direct mounting optic system, which can definitely be improved with this because most of your MOS adapter plates push your optic up higher. Also gives you a higher height over bore. The stock Glock slide finish, which is their NDLC, I do like the finish because it is a durable finish, but it is extremely glossy. If you have sweaty hands, if it's wet, if there's blood, if there's oil, if anything gets on this slide, it makes it extremely more difficult to rack the slide, to the point where if your hand slips or if you don't get a strong purchase on the slide, you can introduce a malfunction when you're racking the slide, which is a big problem. Smooth of a finish, especially when you're racking up here in the optimal way where you come around the front. Even when you're punching and pulling, your hand can still slip. This should be a little bit more closer to like a sandpaper finish, not as rough, but just a little bit more gritty. Even if it has little dimples, even without sweaty hands or any type of lubricant or moisture, it still makes racking the slide a lot more difficult, which moves me on to the next point, which is the slide serrations. Slide serrations are decent, but if they really wanted to make racking the slide optimal, they would curve these around over the top so you can get a complete 270-degree angle of a purchase. You have a full wrap round, which is going to make racking that slide way easier. These side slide serrations work probably about 50%, but not having anything on the top, which I don't understand why you wouldn't, because you're going to have some type of the surface of your hand on the top of the slide. So if there's serrations there, you're going to have more surface area to grip to, and it's going to catch your hand more and not slide as much, or make these slide serrations more aggressive. These are very simple things that you come to notice. Bringing it back to texture, the stippling on the grip is pretty garbage. It only has it about this much of the way around, and then the rest of the firearm all up here, back here by the beaver tail, no stippling. Under here on the undercut of the trigger, no stippling. So there's a lot of surface area where you have your hands, where you're going to be clamping, or where you're even going to be resting them to get a good grip, where there's nothing at all. Again, extremely glossy. Any type of moisture, sweat, anything that gets on there, you're going to be slipping. Gun's going to be bouncing around in your hand if you don't get a really strong purchase. That's why you see people in competition who use chalk. It's a very mild stippling. This is a sandpaper here, which is a lot better. I have some small calluses, nothing major, but this allows me to get a better purchase on the gun. It should be increased at least a step to more of a mid-aggressive texture, to where it's covering more surface, because right now it's almost non-existent. There's a little bit to get a little bit of a purchase, but you got to think when you're using the gun, where is my hand on the gun? My hand is all the way around on this gun, and even on the side of the gun where my finger is. So having a glossy finish, or a place where you're going to be using that does not have stippling, texture, or serrations, makes absolutely no sense at all, because why would I want a smooth surface where I'm going to be putting my hands and or clamping? On the Walther PDP, if you look at the slide serrations on that, then things are aggressive, and that's what I like. I want to be able to punch my hand into that serrations, rack the mess out of that slide, and keep moving, not to the point where I got to baby the slide because my hands are about to slip off it. I think it's poor product testing. I don't think that they're getting these guns into the right situations, not just where I have it on a stand and I shoot 10,000 rounds through it and it's good. Well, I didn't even touch the gun. Another texture thing. We have almost no ledge here. It's so small to the point where it's called a minimalist ledge, what other people would refer to it as what it should be, which is a gas pedal. They should have an integrated gas pedal on what I would prefer the left side. I think ambi controls are kind of stupid to an extent when the majority of people out there are right-handed shooters. Now, if it doesn't affect performance or doesn't get in the way of anything, I'm fine with the ambi. Like right here, this doesn't get in the way of anything. Light activation, that's where I would not like ambi. At least be able to rest my thumb so I have something there, because with this little minimalist ledge, not only can you not really push down on it, but resting your finger right there is pretty difficult. Texture and surface is extremely smooth. I really like the Glock magazines because they're reliable. In the sizes, they jump from a 17 to a 24, and the 24 is extremely long instead of taking a 17 round mag, which is like $30, and then adding a $40 magazine extension on there, the +6, which not only does it make it look and fit better in the gun because the magazine extension butts up to the end of the mag well, but it's also shorter in distance. They couldn't figure out how to make a 15 round magazine for the 43X, which makes no sense because Shield Arms makes them, and other companies for different firearms and pistols make 15 round magazines for the same size. So I'm not sure why they can't get their sizings right, because most people are opting for magazines extensions anyways. They need to make a 17 rounder that has a Glock magazine extension already on it to give it the total of 23 in a better length, which also keeps out debris. That's something that would be nice if they could include. They need to make back straps where it almost makes slightly of an L to fix that grip angle, make it that 18 degree instead of just a back strap that keeps the same grip angle, but it makes the width of it longer. You would think a lot of this would be common sense. The main reason and the good thing about Glock and why I run Glock is because they run reliably for a very long amount of time with a low amount of maintenance. And the second good thing is that they have a lot of aftermarket support for customization or different needs, but everything else besides the reliability and the aftermarket support pretty much sucks. In the year of 2025, where there's so much improvement needed on the standard of a gun like Glock, is pretty disappointing and frustrating. The Glock Gen 5 came out in 2017, and now the Gen 6 is finally released, which it won't even be available till 2026. So we have a 9-year difference from the Gen 5 all the way to the Gen 6. Still a lot or some of these problems have not been fixed. To have 9 years of time to fix problems and then still not have them fixed, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. To give you perspective in the amount of money available to be able to turn this into something better, innovate, product design, and testing, Gaston's Glock estimated net worth was $1.1 billion in 2021. That was before he died in 2023. An annual revenue in 2021 of approximately $975 million. There was a decline in 2023, I'm guessing when Gaston died, of $665 million annual revenue with a profit approximately of $43 million. After all, we're talking about Glock perfection here, and there's a lot of things that are unperfected. So I don't think something can be perfect unless it's perfect in all aspects. Is it perfect in the reliability aspect? Yes. And that can realistically be done. I don't think that the motto should be Glock perfection, because I think that that would be misleading or an overstatement. We have the Glock 17 Gen 6, Glock 19, and Glock 45. That's all they are showing right now. One key thing to notice on the Glock 17, it is a Glock 47 and not a true Glock 17. And that is because, like on the frame with the 47, the bottom part of the frame where you attach the flashlight, it is cut back farther, so it's not fully to the end of the barrel. They have completely, it seems like, discontinued and replaced the Glock 17, which I think is a big mistake. If they got rid of the Glock 17, that means they got rid of the full-size recoil spring, which I personally think there's some advantages to the full-size recoil spring. When you're switching down to a compact recoil spring, like what's on the 47, the 19, the 45, it's a smaller recoil spring. What some people like about that is that the dot returns faster to you because it's more snappy. So it flips up and down, but it returns faster, whereas on supposedly the Glock 17, it has a smoother recoil impulse, but it doesn't return as fast. If I have a full-size firearm, I want a full-size recoil spring. If I wanted a compact recoil spring, I would just get the Glock 45. I think that it's pretty stupid to not only completely discontinue the Glock 17, but to make a Glock 47, call it a 17. What are we doing here? I think it is their greatest pistol ever made, and it has lasted the time overall. Now, I would like to get more time on the 47. We still are using adapter plates, but from what it looks like, the adapter plate sits recessed below where the screw holes thread into, which means that they just milled a little bit more of the slide down in the bigger areas where they didn't, which is going to give a direct mount and then fits flush with the two other screw holes, which the screw holes do not go into the adapter plate, they go into the slide. For nearly 4 decades, the pursuit of perfection has guided Glock in focusing on what truly matters: safety, reliability, and our commitment to our customers. Pursuit of whose definition of perfection? The CEO of Glock Inc. is Carlos Guevara. His definition? Commitment to our customers. In what way? You don't have to focus on safety and reliability anymore because you don't have that problem. What you need to focus on is, yes, commitment to the customers about what the problems actually are and how to improve things from people who are actually using these products. Gen 6 line continues that commitment. I would say that's debatable. We're moving forward thoughtfully. Debatable. The first Glock was released in 1982 with the Glock 17. Best Glock ever made. Full-size recoil spring, full-size barrel, slide, grip. We're going to get rid of what defined Glock perfection. That's a great idea. Let's get rid of it and then call it something that it's not, which it's the 47, not the 17. All the way up to the Gen 4, there's almost no difference at all. When we go to the Gen 5, we got AMBI and the MOS system. Very little change besides the front slide serrations. Why does it take 5 generations of Glocks to get front slide serrations? From 1982, the Glock 17, all the way to 2017, finally got serrations, finally got the MOS system, and that's it. They added a beaver tail after 5 generations. What a mistake. And then 8 years later, this is publicly released, which it's not coming out until 2026, would be 9 years. And as we're going to go over, they still haven't fixed problems. What this reminds me of is what Apple does with their iPhone, except releasing it less often. Glock, for example, they'll release a new generation every, let's say, 8 years or so, with very minimal improvements. I would say the Gen 6 possibly has the most improvements out of all of them, even though I think some of them I wouldn't call an improvement. I would call a backstep or a negative. That's not what helps gets improvement. When we bandwagon and fanboy and buy every Glock possible, what gets improvement is when you stop buying these things if you are not truly satisfied with it or having a higher set of standards. Let's explore the evolution, shall we? Gen 6 is going to be available January 20th, 2026. Built for you, see how? I doubt that already. There is 9 supposed improvements that we have or changes. Number 1, we have the palm swell. Contours the pistol to the natural curvature of the hand. So what that is the sides, instead of them being flat, they'll be a little bit more rounded, which could be more comfortable, potentially for a little bit better of a grip. When you're clamping your hands around, it makes a bit of a circle. So having the grip in a more circular motion could be beneficial, although that is not something I've ever thought about, desired, or thought needed improved when using the Gen 5. Number 2, the Gen 6 grip texture RTF6 combines 2 textures into one to create the perfect blend of performance and comfort. More aggressive grip texture around the same areas as before, but it still doesn't have any texture up here. None on the sides like you see on this. Probably about a 50% improvement, but they did not add it to all the areas that I would have liked, all in the smooth areas. Number 3, the enlarged beaver tail encourages a higher grip while ensuring the slide can cycle freely. This is definitely a step backwards in my opinion. I have never liked beaver tails, and I think what we have on the Gen 5 and the previous models has been sufficient. You need to be pushing into the corner right here, and you're not going to get slide bite like that. So I don't like the beaver tail. If I were to get it, I would end up sanding or cutting it off if possible. Number 4, the border surrounding the slide stop lever has been enlarged to prevent unintentional activation. If you have a higher grip shooting where your palm is up higher towards the slide stop, then maybe that could be helpful. But then again, if you're pushing the meat right under your thumb into that area, you're still going to have your slide not locking to the rear in certain instances. I think it's lazy just to add an extra piece of polymer right there, which again doesn't fix that issue that could be happening, instead of fixing the original issue, which is the garbage slide release. They need to switch to something more like this, maybe up a little bit higher, maybe extend it out a little bit, but they kept that same slide release that sucks, that's not easy to hit. And if you have that border, it's going to make it even harder to hit and lock to the rear. So this is a major step back. It pokes outwards, whereas this one is pretty close to flush, comes out just a hair, but this one is very enlarged. This is only just going to get in the way. Number 5, the thumb rest is textured and extended for increased control during recoil. This is a good thing. I am glad that they added a better thumb rest, and they did add the stippling to the thumb rest that's on that part of the grip as well. The problem that this could cause is if it's extended too much, it's going to cause problems with light activation, and it is ambi on both sides. If I have to swipe down with my right finger and it's getting in the way, or if I have to do like a curve motion to hit it and to unactivate, that could cause a problem. Overall, I do like that they added that. It's a win in that area. Number 6, Glock slide serrations are angled deeper into the slide to make the surface engagement more tactile for slide manipulations. This is a halfway win. Deeper serrations, and the serrations go a little bit higher. I wish that the serrations would have wrapped around the top. I don't know why they won't do it. I'm mainly gripping on is the top of the slide, and you can real easily slip off, and that is where I am getting the most amount of clamp is on the top. So with the serrations going up a little bit higher, it could help, but again, a halfway fix. I think it's a little bit lazy to not go all the way around the top. Number 7, undercut trigger guard allows for higher grip support and comfort. So they majorly undercut this portion. It looks very thin, like an 1/8 of an inch, maybe a 1/16 of an inch thin right in the corner here. I didn't think that was a problem. There's already an undercut there, and I thought it was plenty sufficient. Maybe it will be helpful. I think that was more a lazy improvement, that they're just trying to add something to their checklist of improvements. Way too skinny. I could definitely see that breaking or snapping somehow. Number 8, each Gen 6 pistol comes standard with a flat face trigger for consistent finger placement and trigger pull. The trigger maintains the safe action system for uncompromising safety and reliability. It's more of kind of a slant or a triangle. It comes down and then angles off. I didn't necessarily have a problem with the curved on the previous Gen 5 stock triggers, but this could be an improvement. The one here, I kind of like it better because it's a curve, but it does have a flat face and then a little corner at the bottom. Theirs has a corner in the middle, which I don't think is super natural. I would have rathered them curve that out. This one curves out a lot more. It seems that their trigger has a lot less slant than this one. It goes back but comes down a little bit at a straighter of an angle. So it's interesting. They can figure out angles on their triggers, but they can't fix the angles on the backstrap. I think this could be an improvement, but unless they smoothed out the trigger pull and lessened the trigger pull weight at least a pound, I would say that it's a very bare minimal improvement to replace the trigger shoe if they're not fixing any of the bigger problems, which was the pull and the weight of the trigger. We could give 1 point out of 3, 33% improvement. That is not a good percentage. Number 9, Gen 6 pistols come optic ready with a system engineered for adaptability and durability. They did use a different optic system. It comes with 3 optic plates that allow various optics to be screwed directly into the slide. So we have number 2, 3, and 4 optic plates. I'm not sure if they'll make other optic plates. I do like the look of this system better. It has the post integrated into the plates, and then instead of screwing into the optic plate, you screw directly into the slide, which is going to take out the variable of your screws breaking off in the optic plate. There is 4 holes, so for 2 different sets of screws, I think it's going to be a more secure mounting system. So I do like what they're doing there. However, for these closed emitter pistol optics, where you have the clamp on the side and you're screwing into an adapter clamp system, more like a Picatinny rail, I don't see how this is going to solve that issue for the closed emitter pistol optics. Why are we not looking for solutions with closed emitter pistol optics? I'm not sure. That is disappointing in that regard. I'm guessing you're going to have an adapter plate that screws into the slide, and you attach your closed emitter to that adapter plate. For the 509T, Aimpoint Acro, Steiner, those clamping kind, that is still a problem. If you were to go with some of the smaller Holosun closed emitters that you'll be able to screw into the slide with for those, or the Trijicon RCR, they again halfway solve the problem. I would have liked to see better innovation or some more thoughtful process here to be able to directly mount these clamping style closed emitters directly to the slide, although that could be a little bit unrealistic from my perspective. They're still sending out the piece of absolute junk Glock magazine speed loader. I don't know how they haven't been able to make that better. That is something that could have been improved. 2 extra back straps makes me think that because they're showing them in the rear view that they did not fix the grip angle, and they did the same thing they did with the Gen 5 where it's just widening the grip. They didn't fix the serrations the way I would have liked. They didn't fix the slide release, and not only did they not fix the slide release, but they made it worse and harder to hit. They didn't fix the grip angle. They 50 or 75% changed the slide serrations. I'm glad that they integrated a type of gas pedal or ledge there. However, it could be too low and could cause issues with activating the light. They undercut the Glock more, which could be good or bad depending for durability. And the trigger is a 1 out of 3 improvement. Overall, I'd give it about a 50% improvement. I have to sand and grind down the beaver tail and the slide stop cover. The improvements it does have aren't substantial enough, in my opinion, to buy a Gen 6, try to sell my Gen 5s, things of that nature. This is not something that I'm going to prioritize by any means. Things I do like about it, even though it's not to my set of standards, the palm swell could be good. I do like the new texture. I like the integrated gas pedal. I like the serrations being cut a little bit deeper. It might be just enough to work a little bit better. I like the new trigger shoe. Hopefully that trigger's fixed. Increased undercut could be nice, and the optic system seems to be better as well. So there is improvements, but I wouldn't say I'm happy with this Gen 6. It's not what I was wanting or desiring. I don't think that this should be bandwagoned or bought just because. I don't think it's that good. For people who like the 23, 43, 48, all these different types of models, they aren't available. And I don't see anything so far about them making those models. Glock 47 was made. It was made for U.S. Border Patrol because they wanted parts compatibility with the Glock 19. The Glock 47 wasn't made for the civilian in mind. I think that most companies listen to civilian customers on a very small scale, and if they do, it has to be an overwhelming amount. The only way to see substantial changes or to have your voice heard is to stop buying from these companies and bigger scales. If everyone goes out and buys the Gen 6 and the only difference they made on the Gen 6 was that they added the beaver tail, they will not care at all about any type of improvement, and it's going to incentivize them to do whatever they want and not listen to customers. On the opposite side, if no one went out to buy the Gen 6, they would be thinking very deeply and asking everyone, why isn't the Gen 6 being bought? What can we change? Together, we can take action in a passive way of not purchasing something so that our voices can be more heard, because these companies respond most to incoming money. If the money is not coming in at the portion they desire, then they'll be more willing to make changes. Overall, I'm disappointed with the Gen 6, especially having 8 years to make it. They didn't change the garbage plastic sights, which is ridiculous. The trigger safety might have got improved a little bit. Gen 3, 1998. Then to the Gen 4 in 2010. So it took them 12 years to go from the Gen 3 to the Gen 4, which there was very little improvement. I think the biggest improvement was making the mag release bigger. And then the Gen 4 to Gen 5, 2010 to 2017, 7 years, which there was some decent improvement. The MOS system was huge, and the ambi slide release, I wouldn't really call that huge, but for lefties, yes. And then again, 2017 to 2025, which it's really going to be 2026, which is 9 years where I would say that we are taking back steps. The stippling definitely looks more aggressive. I like the look of the stippling, but as you can see in that slide stop area, good luck locking that to the rear. Goodness gracious, what bozo designed that? I don't know how this stuff gets signed off and approved. I swear they pick up crackhead Ned off the street, have him come in here and like, how do you feel? Oh, it feels great. All right, we're selling it. Type of thing. It's not enclosed at the bottom like the other triggers. It's enclosed. On this trigger, there's a slot in the bottom for that trigger safety to where it can be pushed down and then it closes. I personally don't like that. It seems like it would break easier. The beaver tail is like a 1/2 inch long. They pretty much took what is off the end of the slide right here, and I would say they times it by like 10. So way too long of a beaver tail. Go ahead and take a saw and cut that piece of junk right off of there. It took me less than a year to figure out what the problems were with the Gen 5, and they can't fix them in 9. If you want to see more videos like this, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to help support the channel, and thank you for watching.